It's time for the Las Vegas Sportsline.
Money won is twice as sweet as money earned.
And we welcome you to the Friday edition of the Las Vegas Sportsline. Pretty busy Thursday night. Not only in baseball, but in basketball because it was the NBA draft. Teddy Covers is here. I'm Dave Cokin. Ari Platinum is our producer, and right on the line with us at the top of the show, he's a guy who follows the NBA very closely, knows his stuff. We want to talk draft with him. And then it's Rob Veno from Sports Memo. Hi, Rob. How are you?
Hey, Dave. How are you today, buddy?
Good. Looking forward to the All-Star break in baseball so I can take a few days off from this nonsense.
Have a beer.
Yes, we'll be down in Del Mar, even though the horses aren't even running yet. I will be down in Del Mar. But in the meantime, lots of stuff to talk about from last night's draft. And before we get into the get into a draft pick by pick, it looks to me like one of those years where the first two guys are slam dunks. And after that, you've got some good players, but I don't know that any of them are going to be game changers. So this was a year where you really wanted to get in the top two. And that's a bad job for the New York Knicks because they lost all those games on purpose, Rob, and didn't end up in the top two. They got a good player, but they didn't get one of the top two.
Yeah, it's crazy. The NBA, I guess the lottery changes had their effect because losing all the games you want didn't necessarily help you get to the top. It is kind of funny to think, Dave, that when we entered the college basketball season, R.J. Barrett was the number one high school recruit, not Zion Williamson. Certainly the perception changed once the college season took place. We'll see what Barrett does in New York. There's probably somebody within that first round that'll step up and be a game changer. We just don't know who that player is going to be. You have to be in the right situation. And like you said, there's a lot of good talent. But we'll see which particular kid steps up and becomes that guy who nobody thought was going to be kind of a borderline all-star player. So Zion, as you mentioned, slam dunk. Number 2 pick, Jean Morant, should be slam dunk, and then we go from there.
So when you look at, and let's not just go from there, because how much does Zion change New Orleans? You know, we're talking about a franchise that has some interesting pieces now in the post-Anthony Davis era, but is this a 25-win team? Is this a 40-win team? Is this a 50-win team? You know, I can't recall an offseason, Rob, in which there was so much at stake in free agency where there's, A, 15 different teams that could be contending for titles next year, and B, 15 different teams that could be 30-win teams or 50-win teams based on what happens over the course of the next couple of weeks. So everything that happened in the draft last night, intriguing, but the real intrigue of the NBA offseason just beginning.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, Teddy. I mean, if we have this same conversation a month from now, probably come up with a few different opinions for sure. As for New Orleans, they probably are making as good of a scenario out of a bad situation as you can make. They certainly recruited to the style of play that they like to use there. Alvin Gentry up and down the floor, 94 feet. When you talk about the first two guys that they picked, Zion Williamson and Jackson Hayes, I tried thinking of a combination this morning, guys. Maybe you can help me out, but is there a 4 and 5 that are going to be starters that run the floor as well as those guys do? So the pace for New Orleans certainly is going to be there, and they'll have guys that can execute at that pace. Point guard should be good. I think the pieces that they got from L.A. fit their system. We'll see where they go from here. They have $30 million, I think, to work with in free agency to try and supplement this roster. I know Julius Randle's on the way out, but I think they really made the best of a bad situation right now. And as I mentioned, the way they like to play, that's the way they drafted. And for us, you know, whether they're a 20-win team, a 30-win team, a 50-win team, any of these teams, we need to know if they're going to be a, 20-62 over-under team or a 20-62 ATS team. I think New Orleans might carry some point spread value. We'll see how they fill out the roster.
I'm curious to see what the reaction is because in terms of the hype that he got pre-draft, this is more than any. And I realize a lot of this is the expansion of social media, but he's the most hyped prospect since LeBron James. He really is. I mean, there have been other great prospects, but in terms of the overall hype machine, this is enormous. So the microscope's going to be on New Orleans right from the outset. Don't they have to go out and try? I know this sounds stupid and unrealistic, but don't they have to try and put themselves in a position to at least be respectable right away and contending within 1 or 2 years?
You know what? You're probably right, Dave, where expectations are concerned. I don't know how much, that's a laid-back media in New Orleans, and maybe the rope is a little bit longer than it would be in New York City or Philadelphia or places like that where they really expect instant gratification. Maybe there's a little longer rope. The love affair may last longer with Zion Williamson. But certainly I think that when you have a group of kids like this, I don't know that there's going to be any locker room dissension amongst guys. There's not going to be anybody jealous of Zion. Zion's not going to be jealous of anybody else. So I think they'll play together well. They'll probably mesh real well. And that's half the battle in the NBA. Maybe I'm a little more positive on what they can do than some people are. And, again, positive doesn't mean that they're going to come out of the chute and be a playoff team. Nobody expects that. But I just think that from a cover perspective, from maybe a totals perspective, I think we can make some headway with this New Orleans team. They're probably a little better than people are giving them credit for right now.
What about the Memphis Grizzlies, who traded away a couple of real heart and soul guys in the last 6 months? Obviously, with Marc Gasol ending up winning a title in Toronto, and Mike Conley out the door to Utah, though that trade has not yet been finalized. Ja Morant, a guy who a lot of people got their first real look at during the NCAA tournament, and it was impressive. How good does he make Memphis, and can the Grizzlies be a point spread moneymaker in 2019/20?
Yeah, I'd be a little more hesitant on that side, Teddy, although injuries took a lot away from them. So, again, you have to get used to guys like Avery Bradley, Kyle Anderson coming back and playing this year. The injury beat that team up so bad last year. But, boy, Utah makes out a lot better in that Mike Conley deal than Memphis does, for sure. In my estimation, you put Mike Conley on the Utah Jazz, and now the West has another team that's with Golden State in the situation they're in, that's battling for that conference title next year. I'm not as high, I guess I would say, on Memphis. I watch a lot of Ja Morant. Played in the Ohio Valley Conference. There's a special place in my heart for Belmont University, so I see a lot of Ohio Valley. And the kid's good. There's no question about it. The athletic ability is off the charts, but he's going to be expected to be the leader of that team, I think, at this point in time. When you look up and down their roster, I don't know who else you would consider to be the leader. Mike Conley took those reins, did it very well. You're asking a rookie from the Ohio Valley to come out and do it right away. I'm not so sure that's going to happen.
So now we get to the Knicks, who wanted to be the number 1 overall. They end up with number 3, and they get Barrett. And, it's tough. I watched some of the NBA draft show last night. And like most of the draft shows, other than the NFL where they're a little more willing to criticize, it's kind of a cheerleading session. I'm not saying by any means that R.J. Barrett isn't going to be a good NBA player. But he's not even close to the top 2, in my opinion. He's not much of a three-point shooter. He's actually not much of a free throw shooter. It's 67% free throws. That's not very good. I see red flags with this guy. I don't think he's a slam dunk star in the NBA. And so it just could be another disaster for the Knicks that's waiting to happen.
You could be right, Dave, and the shooting is probably the biggest culprit in his game right now. Because remember, Duke couldn't shoot threes whatsoever last year. And
it was so bad. It was so bad in the tournament, we were actually seeing teams back off him and say, go ahead, shoot the corner 3. You can't make one anyway. And that's what Barrett needed to do, and he didn't do it.
Yeah, and that would lead you to question almost, you have Dennis Smith Jr. on that roster. You have Emmanuel Mudiay on that roster. And Dennis Smith Jr., in a game of one-on-one, might be the better player, to tell you the truth. Certainly he's got every bit of the athletic ability, and Dennis Smith Jr. can shoot the ball from distance. So I don't know how this works, what combination gets to play together. There's a lot of sorting out to go through there, and it's going to be tough for the coaching staff to put that team together. I don't know. I'm not as high on R.J. Barrett. I'm with you, I guess, in that respect, Dave. As the guys were on coverage last night handling the NBA draft, to me, if you can't, we see it all the time in the NBA, right? I mean, it's really pretty simple. Ben Simmons, he can't shoot. Philadelphia winds up playing 4-on-5 on offense. They get knocked out of the NBA conference semifinals, and I live outside of Philadelphia. The amount of blame on Ben Simmons is overwhelming, and maybe rightfully so. And R.J. Barrett could be heading down that same exact path. Great open floor talent, but if you can't shoot in the NBA, it's real hard when you talk about being a playoff team. So he's going to have to work on it. Ben Simmons, you know, a little deterrent of his. He doesn't really work on it as much as he should. And it's funny to hear him in an interview at the start of the season where he almost admitted to where he doesn't really take 500 jump shots a day. So that stuff's got to change with R.J. Barrett for sure for the Knicks to get better.
You know, the thing is, it's not like some guys can't learn to shoot the ball. I mean, the best player in the NBA in the playoffs was a lousy shooter at San Diego State, and he's become a good shooter. So it can happen. But for every one of those, I think you'll find 4 or 5 guys who weren't good shooters and remain bad shooters. I'll mention the 76ers guy, Fultz.
Yep.
The rep on him coming out of Washington was, kind of a weird release. We don't know if he's going to be able to shoot in the NBA. He can't shoot in the NBA, and he's turned out to be a disastrous draft choice. And I'm not plugging R.J. Barrett into that pigeonhole right off the bat. But I think he's and under a microscope in New York, oh boy.
Right. There you go, Dave.
I mean, if he's
that's the point right there, Dave. I mean, you hit the nail on the head because it could be 10 games in where Knicks fans
really?
I'll take the under.
R.J. Barrett.
Yeah.
Exhibition season.
Yeah, I will definitely take the under 10 games where the Knicks fans turn on Barrett, unless he's scoring 35 a game and hitting 48% from beyond the arc right out of the chute. But I mean, when you look at the number ones, there have been, Anthony Bennett. Wiggins is not the NBA player that people thought he would. Fultz, I'm still not sold on Ayton. Bargnani. I mean, Greg Oden.
It's been a 50-50 type thing.
Yeah, even for the number one pick. So when you're talking about 3 and 4 and on down the line, although 4 is worth talking about with Hunter from Virginia, and if there was a team that I think has built a championship base in the last couple of drafts, that team would be the Atlanta Hawks. What do you think about what Atlanta did last night moving up, and what do you think of their future?
Yeah, fantastic, Teddy. I had them sitting in the top tier here of teams that I think did well. If Cam Reddish can give them anything, and now his poor performance last year sort of being attributed to a core muscle injury, but we know he came in as a shooter. And for the Atlanta Hawks, when you went up and down that roster, the problem position was small forward. And they got 2 really good ones last night in DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish. I'm interested in players like Jarrett Culver and DeAndre Hunter simply from the standpoint that the offensive systems that they're in college basketball hinder those guys immensely. You play for Tony Bennett, you don't get to really exploit your offensive abilities. You play at Texas Tech, you don't really get to utilize your offensive talent. And these guys now let loose in an NBA that wants to, one-on-one play, guys that can get to the rim. Both Culver and DeAndre Hunter, in my estimation, should flourish offensively, be even better than what they were in college. You add to that Bruno Fernando from Maryland, who I think is again, I mentioned it earlier with the Jackson Hayes and Zion Williamson combination running the floor. Atlanta, very much an open floor team, and Bruno Fernando has a nonstop motor that goes up and down the floor. So I think these are all good fit picks for what the Hawks are building there, TC. And to me, they did one of the better jobs in the draft. It probably hinges on how much Reddish gives them, but I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt right now and say maybe the injury caused some of the offensive problems last year, and hopefully he can fight through that and become the shooter that he was heading into Duke.
Rob Veno with us right now covering the NBA draft with Teddy Covers. I'm Dave Cokin. So you mentioned Culver, who ends up with the Suns. And again, I don't want to make it sound like I'm a guru. I'm not, okay?
Well, nobody is. We were just talking the number one picks.
Yeah, but I mean, there's guys out there who know a lot more than I do. But I'm just basing it on what I saw and the type of player that I think is. I really like the Culver pick. I would have had him number 3 overall.
Character-wise, we like him too.
Well, I like it that way, and the fact that he played in a system that's unlike most others in college basketball. Texas Tech is a really physical team.